A dystopian sci-fi setting. Kids with psychic powers. A city-controlling supercomputer run amok. A mushroom tower? They couldn't think of a better name for that? Anyway, today we're talking about Galerians, a weird hybrid of survival horror and action game that has some excellent, dare I say, amazing elements to it, but it also has some maddening design choices, and is honestly painful to play at times. But these are the discrepancies that I live for. So, let's take a look at the black sheep of PS1 survival horror games, Galerians. Galerians was developed by Polygon Magic and released for the PlayStation 1 in 1999 in Japan, with North American and European releases coming out the following year. It's usually classified as a survival horror game, and sure, it's got most of the staples of the time: fixed camera angles, tank controls, key hunting, sometimes obtuse puzzles, inventory management. Yep, looks like we got almost everything on the old survival horror checklist, except, wait a minute, I think we're missing the horror. But hey, that's okay. Galerians, for the most part, leans way harder into sci-fi than horror. I mean, it takes place in the 26th century, for Christ's sake. And this gives it a pretty unique atmosphere compared to other survival horror games of the time. As a side note here, Polygon Magic also developed the PS1 game Incredible Crisis, which was released only a couple months before Galerians in Japan. It's a game about a working-class Japanese family who are just trying to get home in time for their grandmother's birthday party. Just trying to get home for Grandma's birthday. It also got a Western release, if you can believe it. Anyway, when you start up Galerians, you get an intro cinematic, which I can best describe as pure, uncut 90s edging. I mean, edginess. But then again, I don't know. Listen to these screams and judge for yourself. And it just kind of goes on like that for a while. The game itself is a bit more subdued. Just a bit. Before we jump in, I want to give a special thanks to the Dungeon Dwellers who support this channel on Patreon and through YouTube memberships. If you'd like to join them, stick around until the end of the video to find out how. In Galerians, you take the role of Rion Steiner, a teenage boy who awakens strapped to a table inside a medical facility. He's also receiving telepathic messages from some girl he doesn't remember, who asks for his help. And all the while, he's being pumped full of strange chemicals by some scientists in another room. The Japanese version of the game just calls them drugs, while the English version uses the term Psychic Power Enhancement Chemical, PPEC for short, PP for even shorter.
I just administered the PP!
Those kids who had been injected with the PP. I was experimented on in the hospital. They used various PP on me.
Childish. All the poking and prodding seems to have awakened Rion's psychic abilities, but the experiments have also wiped most of his memories, so he needs to use his new powers to fend off those that would try to recapture him, while also locate this girl who keeps chatting him up inside his head, and piece together his fragmented past. Amnesiac main character is one of the oldest tropes in the book, but it works well enough to set up a central mystery for a survival horror game. The first ability you'll need to use to escape the opening room is Scan. By pressing triangle, Rion can get hints on how to access certain places or where to find items for puzzles. It's also used in context-sensitive situations, like unlocking doors and triggering certain events. In this situation, Rion will overload the automatic lock and be able to exit the room. He runs into one of the scientists in the next room, who's surprised that Rion's alive, let alone conscious, and Rion wants to know where he is and what's going on. As he interrogates the scientist, an electrical current starts to wrap around the man's head, and the guy reveals that Rion will need to speak to Clinic Chief Lem to get more info. This scientist isn't too happy about Rion's little Jedi mind trick, so we get our first taste of combat. The big selling point for Galerians is that you use psychic powers to attack, and that's your only form of attack. Rion here can't hold his own in a fight. I mean, look at him. He's just a little sissy boy. Hold R1 to charge up a power meter in the top right of the screen. And since we have the green chemical Nalcon equipped, pressing X will release a shockwave. One fully charged blast will take out this scientist. There are 3 different powers that you'll gain access to over the course of the game. Nalcon is a psychic shockwave, and Red sets things on fire. These 2 were injected into Rion during the opening cutscene, so you start with them. The third is D-Felon, which the game describes as anti-gravity. It lets you pick up enemies and slam them into the ground. You'll find this one a little bit later on. Nalcon and Red don't have to be fully charged to use. Doing a 1/4 or halfway burst will still put the hurt on most enemies. And this is good, because in a lot of situations, you'll face multiple foes, or be up against enemies that can attack quickly. The last power though, D-Felon, the anti-gravity attack, needs to be fully charged to use. But while charging, it also stuns enemies, so that's nice. Rion's psychic powers drain with use, and you'll need to pick up vials of PP to replenish them. You'll need to use an item called a Beject that you find early on to inject the chemicals into Rion's neck. And Beject, yeah, I guess a bee stinging you? Sure, whatever. There's a bar in the top right that will show you how much of whatever chemical you have equipped is left in Rion's system. You'll also see an HP bar, self-explanatory, and an AP bar. Now, think about most other games. What do you think AP stands for? Action points? Ability points? No, none of those. These are your anger points. I'm not making this up. As the manual puts it, the bar represents Rion's current level of psychic anger. This bar fills up quickly when you get hit, and fills slowly over time, but only while moving. So essentially, walking makes Rion angry. When I realized this, I couldn't help but think that every time I made Rion walk or run anywhere, I was just making him more and more upset.
Just the goddamn hospital.
There's an interesting thing that happens when the AP bar reaches full. When Rion's anger has reached its peak, the bar will start flashing, and the next time you press R1 to charge an attack, you'll instead get a brief in-game cutscene of Rion freaking out. He'll clutch his head and scream in frustration. The game calls this state shorting. Basically, he's short-circuiting. His powers are no longer under his control. While shorting, Rion's health continuously drains due to the physical strain of his out-of-control powers, and all he can do is hobble around slowly. But getting close to an enemy is a one-hit kill, because Rion will make their heads explode in a fountain of blood.
Oh. No!
According to the game's lore, violent mood swings and irritation are a side effect of psychic power enhancement chemicals. To counteract this, a pill called Delmator must be taken, which will decrease Rion's anger points to 0 and restore his normal mental state. And you can find these lying around in different areas of the game. Now, it may sound annoying having to deal with a petulant teenager whose anger is constantly rising throughout the game, and there are times where it can be. But there are also times where shorting can be used strategically to overcome some difficult encounters. It even works on the first boss. The other bosses after that are immune to it though, and there are story reasons for this. Rion starts the game off with his anger meter almost full, so you'll most likely experience your first short in this hallway here very early on. And the designers definitely planned it that way, because they gleefully placed 3 hospital staff here for you to go all Tetsuo on. Later on, when you've got some recovery capsules, the game's healing item, you can heal through the HP drain to sustain a short. But that's a tactic best used when you know where enemies are going to pop up. Or when you're at the end of the game and don't have any Delmator left to lower your AP and you just have to hobble through the final areas, hoping the game will deal out enough healing items for you to make it through. But that's a story for later. Either way, shorting is very satisfying. Also, about recovery capsules, they replenish all of your HP, so it's best to use them only when you're very low. There's also an item called Skip, which can increase the effectiveness of your psychic powers. The level 1 next to your stats in the top right will raise when you take Skip, and can be maxed out at level 3. This will make the power gauge increase faster, and also add multiple levels to it. The last item is Apollinar, and you only get 1 throughout the whole playthrough. This raises Rion's AP to max instantly, useful when you need to instigate a short to get through a tough enemy group. But this can also be accomplished by just running around until the AP bar fills up.
God, moving everywhere. God.
As awesome as it is to use psychic powers, there are several gripes I have with the combat in this game. First off, enemy placement can be a bit mean, during screen transitions in particular, and it's easy to get stun locked by multiple enemies, especially when the ones who also use psychic powers start showing up. Rion also gets stuck on geometry quite frequently. This is an issue both in and out of battle. I can't tell you how many times I got stuck running down a straight hallway because some piece of the wall was sticking out. You also have no way to manually aim your attacks. So maybe you've already attacked and weakened a specific enemy, but they're close to another enemy and you end up attacking that one instead. You're also locked into position while charging. So if an enemy moves, you could end up wasting your attack. But okay, just hear me out. Full disclosure. When I was a kid, whenever people asked me what kind of superpower I'd want to have, my answer would always be psychic powers. Moving objects with your mind, or being able to throw stuff around, or just create some kind of psychic shockwave seemed so freaking cool. And I watched the shit out of movies like Akira and Scanners and was always looking for more stories about kids or people with psychic powers. So when I first heard about Galerians, probably in an issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly, because that was my preferred gaming magazine back then, I desperately wanted this game. And I'll admit, back in 2000, that love of the idea of psychic abilities, and also my love of survival horror games at the time, probably blinded me to a lot of the issues with Galerians gameplay. Now, having played it again, after more than 20 years since the last time I played it, and having done so for a video on my, what some would consider, game review channel on YouTube, I can more clearly see some of its flaws, and places where the game design could be improved. But here's the thing, I don't care, because psychic powers are still awesome, and Galerians kicks so much ass. Yeah, I don't know, it's just a cool fucking game. I've said this before, sort of, but when I make videos about games, I don't really care if they're quote-unquote good or not. Like, in the sense of good gameplay. But if a game has something about it in its ideas or story or world that gets me excited, then I can tolerate a lot. And I think games that are interesting or try something different, even if they don't fully succeed at it, the effort and the passion is more important than a good game. And that's what makes it worth talking about for me. And Galerians definitely falls into that category. The rest of the hospital follows the tried and true survival horror formula. Look for key items, solve puzzles, manage your inventory. There are some weird choices here too, like how you can't see most items in the environment. Unlike, say, Resident Evil or Silent Hill, where items are modeled and you can see them sitting around, in Galerians, only some of them are like that. Most are invisible, and you just have to mash X to find stuff. And the triggers for these can be annoyingly specific, and there are sometimes flavor text descriptions near items, so you'll be trying to pick something up and have to keep mashing X through the text. Also, some key items need to be checked twice before Rion will pick them up. Like, you'll find it and get a flavor text about the item, but then you have to check it again to actually grab it. And with a few of these, the first time you find them, it's not really clear that you need whatever you're examining. So you could end up missing it and then find out you need it to solve a puzzle later on. But by that time, you might have forgotten about it, so then you're stuck and you don't know how to progress. This becomes a real issue while your anger is constantly rising. I mean, Rion's anger points, the AP bar. Well, let's face it, probably your anger as well. You also have limited inventory space. You bring up your inventory by pressing select. Thankfully, items are separated into different sections for key items and consumables, so you'll never have to choose between picking up an item needed to progress and a recovery capsule, for example. But the consumable items section fills up quickly. This is also where you keep your PP vials. PPC vials. Is that joke working? I don't know. But anyway, each individual vial takes up an inventory slot. They don't stack, which can become an issue, especially if you're not that great at lining up shots or getting the timing down. You could blow through your supplies and screw yourself. Because, like I said, Rion's a wuss, and there's no knife or melee alternative. So if you run out of your psychic ammo, that's it. You gotta reload. Same with AP. If you run out of Delmator to heal your shorting status, and you're also out of recovery capsules, or enter a boss fight where they're immune to the effects of shorting, that's a wrap. And I hope you didn't save with low inventory, because tough shit, you better have a backup save. Otherwise, you've soft locked yourself, and you're going to need to restart the entire game. So while overall the combat is on the easy side, there are a lot of variables working against you in Galerians. Now I might be making this out to sound worse than it actually is. These are worst case scenarios. If you take your time to get acclimated to the combat and are thorough in exploring, you shouldn't run into too many of these issues. And even though the AP bar is constantly rising, you do have time to thoroughly search rooms. It's not a complete race against the clock. Also remember, AP only raises while you're moving, so you can stop to get your bearings or think about what you need to do next. Opening the menu also pauses the game, so that works in a pinch during fights. But yeah, I just wanted to note these negative design choices as things that you could possibly run into, but for the most part, you'll probably be okay. A really positive aspect of the design is that you have an auto map that's filled out as you explore, and can be opened at any time by pressing the circle button. You don't even need to find a map item in the game world, you just always have access to this, except for in the final area of the game. But that section is completely straightforward, so there's no risk of getting lost. The opening hospital area looks admittedly a bit generic, just a research facility kind of place. Sterile hallways, a vaguely futuristic design, but it has a few neat visual flourishes, like this giant statue that you can see through the window on the upper floors, and you run around the base of it on the bottom level. The game uses pre-rendered backgrounds, which is a technique that I wish would make a return. There's really no need for it nowadays, as machines can handle pretty much anything in full 3D now, but there's just something so aesthetically pleasing about a well-done pre-rendered background with a good fixed camera angle. Character models are a bit on the chunky side, pretty standard for this era, but the actual character designs are a neat little time capsule of late 90s, early 2000s anime aesthetic, especially the fashion. Look at those board shorts. And that midriff. This concept art is a mood too. They were really trying to nail an aesthetic here, and goddamn if they didn't pull it off. This stuff is amazing. Makes me wish there was a Galerians anime from the same time. Oh wait, there was. Unfortunately, it's not in this style though. It's computer animated, from 2002, and is only 3 episodes long. It was released shortly before the sequel, Galerians Ash, was set to launch on the PS2, and retells the events of the first game. The animation honestly looks about as good as the cutscenes in the PS2 sequel, and it's not a bad watch. It fleshes out some characters and scenes that you only get brief looks at in the PS1 game. They also released a separate soundtrack in the West filled with popular nu metal and industrial bands of the time, like Slipknot, Skinny Puppy, Godhead, Sevendust, and Fear Factory. Eat your heart out. But going back to the look of the first game, it's fine. The CG cutscenes have that floaty awkwardness to character movement, and some of the impacts in action scenes are lessened because there's no weight to anything. There's also no sound effects sometimes, which makes things even more awkward. Like, what is that, foam furniture? Oh my god, that table throw. No sound at all. It's funny every time.
Lilia!
Oh, and the voice acting. Oh boy. There are so many mumbled lines, and unfortunately there are no subtitle options. In a couple of spots I had to write in my notes that I needed to go back and rewatch a cutscene to understand what some of the characters were saying.
Lilia had continually called for me through her ragged old doll that was left in the shed. My parents are dead, and today I killed a man I had just met.
There's also enough constipated screaming to make Dragon Ball Z jealous. On the other hand, the sound design is pretty good. Each psychic power has its own effect when you attack, and the little powering up sound you hear when you hold R1 is really satisfying. The music has a really techno edge to it, especially during boss fights, and there are some memorable tracks. But it also slows things down from time to time, even giving off Resident Evil vibes with its use of pianos. My favorite track, though, is the one from the hotel, my favorite area in the whole game. Galerians also makes great use of silence and ambience at times, especially in the first area, the hospital. You'll usually just hear the hum of machinery and the beeping of electronic terminals. Good stuff. The hospital has been put on lockdown, engaging security personnel with taser batons and rifles. The human enemies are pretty interesting. The scientists will stop to check on their dead comrades, and the low-level guards will try to get away from Rion when he's shorting. This low-paying security job ain't worth a psychically induced brain aneurysm. There are also robo-guards, who look daunting, but the tried-and-true strategy of running around in circles and waiting for an opening takes care of them pretty easily. The Nowcon Shockwave is your workhorse power, and is effective against pretty much every enemy, though setting things on fire is really fun, so don't sleep on that one from time to time. As Rion explores the hospital, he gets more info related to his past. He gets a vision of a house out in the countryside while checking a mirror, and finds evidence of electroshock-style tests being done on kids, as well as biological experiments. Dr. Lem shows up to taunt Rion on this completely impractical tree of computer monitors. It looks cool anyway. Later on, Rion finds a terminal full of photos of his parents and other people. There's Rion. His mother's name is Elsa. And wow, would you look at that? His father was named Dr. Steiner. Good thing he grew up to become a doctor. We also see photos of a young girl named Lilia and Dr. Pascal, as well as a map. All of this text in-game is blurred, but we can get more detailed breakdowns of the characters in the instruction manual. Dr. Pascal is Lilia's father and a co-worker of Dr. Steiner's. They became friends, and their children, Lilia and Rion, grew up together. Most of this info is also learned through the course of the game. Galerians is pretty good at pacing out its central mystery in this opening act. In another room, Rion finds notes left by one of the scientists related to the experiments that were being conducted on him. Initial tests successfully brought about Rion's psychic abilities, but Dr. Lem then ordered the dosage to be increased 10 times the normal amount. This caused Rion to fall unconscious, but a few days later, he awoke without his memories, only being able to recall his name. Soon after, we get introduced to these failed experiments that the game calls rabbits, which is not the most threatening name for an enemy, but they're fast, and there are more complete variations that can use psychic powers themselves. We'll meet them later. The last section of the hospital requires Rion run around and collect these huge blocks with carvings of different animals that need to be placed on displays inside a boardroom. Placing them in the correct order opens a secret passage, but these things are huge. Where is Rion keeping them? A note inside Dr. Lem's office describes the program he's working on, something that will change the course of human history, or end it entirely, and she will become the new god. Lem's note goes on to talk about how she has surprised him with her rapid growth, and that no one can stop her now. We'll find out more about this mysterious she later. Pulling all the statues out of his ass and opening the secret passage in the boardroom eventually leads to a confrontation with Dr. Lem. But before that, a couple of little moments to mention here. In this maintenance hallway, the screen is shaking, and as Rion continues walking, the shaking becomes more prevalent, and we start hearing clanking sounds and eventually find a white, powered-up version of the robo-guards from earlier. A bit after that, one of the rooms has large test containers with these monstrous creatures inside called arabesques. We'll see more of them much later, but I noped right the hell out of this place the first time. Didn't even really get a good look at it. Finally, Rion comes to a room with a computer terminal that asks him for his name, and starts mentioning something called the family program, which requires a password. And like most of us who can't remember our passwords, Rion goes ballistic.
The family program is top secret.
Dr. Lem shows up and threatens to shoot him with a beject.
You're a natural, Rion, just as I expected.
Dr. Lem?
I can't believe how much you've progressed in only a month.
Father,
Who am I?
Albert
And what is the family
Steiner.
program?
Rion, there are many things you are better off not knowing. This is Nowcon. You'll short-circuit if I inject you with it.
Lem, that's not how this works in-game. Injecting chemicals has no effect on AP or shorting. Let me just put on my game reviewer hat and say that's a bit of ludonarrative dissonance.
Return to the isolation ward.
No.
Stone, Michelangelo City.
Rion, such strength. So be it. It's the freeze chamber for you.
Whew, defiance. Now we get our first boss fight. Lem tries to swat Rion with his cane, like the old man that he is, and a couple of blasts of pyrokinesis will melt his skin off. like the old man that he is. Turns out, he's a robot. This is where the fight gets a bit more annoying. Gotta switch to Nowcon and start running around in circles. And I hope you like this tactic, because this is what every boss fight in the game boils down to. Run in circles, wait for the boss to stop attacking, and get in an attack of your own. Rinse and repeat. It's a shame. Some of the bosses have interesting powers, but the designers didn't use them in interesting ways, so every fight is just this. Dr. Lem here takes a lot of punishment before he goes down, too. I honestly thought he was the toughest boss in the game, probably because I was still getting to grips with things, but he does seem to have more health than the others. But this was probably exacerbated by the fact that I ran out of supplies the first time I fought him, so it was back to the load screen for me. Shit. Luckily, there's a retry feature for boss fights that will set you in the room right before the fight begins. Eventually, he goes down, and Rion takes his eye to unlock the elevator and leave the hospital. We also see this long-haired, laughing Larry watching us leave. Wonder what's up with him. We get a brief look at Michelangelo City, the urban nightmare that the game takes place in. Very retro-futuristic public transportation system here. We only get brief glimpses of the city at large, but they're always really cool when they pop up. Rion found a map to his house back in one of the computer labs, so that's our next stop. I guess I'll break here for spoilers. If you want to experience this game on your own, you can skip to this time for my final thoughts. If not, I'd much prefer it if you stuck around and watched the rest of the video. But the choice is yours. Here we go. Rion arrives at his childhood home. We can explore the backyard and find a key to the back door in this sweet ride in the garage. Scanning the car gives Rion a glimpse of happier times with his parents. We also see tire tracks leading to this grimy pond, but there's nothing to do here yet. Inside, the house is abandoned, and as Rion explores, he'll be assaulted by flashbacks of his parents' grisly murders. Mom just hiding in the fridge again, with a watch in her mouth. There'll also be an assault by these souped-up Mr. X versions of the rabbits. This one dude drops through the ceiling while another kicks down the door, and this part actually scared the shit out of me. The lesser, bandaged, knife-wielding ones will show up here as well. Rion gets a vision of his father talking to Dr. Pascal.
We can't keep them together.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
We have to separate them. I'll take Lilia away from here.
Thank you for everything.
I'll contact you once Lilia is safely hidden.
Later, Rion finds the storage closet in the house where his father was murdered. When Rion finally arrives at his bedroom, he sees a flashback of himself as a child, laid up in bed with a fever. His parents are apologetic over something that they've done to him, with his father mentioning that he didn't have a safe place to hide it, and worrying about whatever it is falling into Dorothy's hands. First time we've heard that name. A note from Rion's mother in his parents' bedroom also asks for forgiveness, but gives us more information. An activation system has been written into Rion's brain. An activation system for what? We'll have to explore more to find out. Rion's dad rigged his home like some kind of funhouse, with secret passages and other weird contraptions, and Rion needs to find his mother and father's rings to open a lock in the library room. When entering the first floor bathroom where Rion's mother hid her ring, we see a flashback of her being attacked by someone. After placing the rings and finding the secret room in the library, Rion finds a recording from his father. In the recording, Dr. Steiner tells how he and Dr. Pascal created a biological computer called Dorothy that could advance on its own.
Under her own power, Dorothy grew completely new cellular circuits, enabling her to abandon her old system kernel. Her growth continued smoothly, and before long, she was controlling her senior computers and rose to the status of Michelangelo City's mother computer. That was when Dorothy's insanity began. She began wondering why such an inferior system, such as humankind, should not be wiped out, and why she could not kill people, even though people kill each other. So I told her about the existence of God. I told her that God was the master of creation. God created humankind, and our fate is in His hands. No one can deny this. In Dorothy's case, her creator was humankind. In other words, Dorothy's God was humankind. She must obey the fate we decide for her. It appeared Dorothy accepted this and began serving humankind again. However, she secretly began simulating God's existence over and over again until she reached her final solution. Her solution was the family program.
We saw a file mentioning the family program back at the hospital. Dorothy had put the hospital under her control and began experimenting on humans, attempting to create a new race of humans with psychic powers who would be under her control.
She called them Galerians.
That's the name of the game! So Dorothy was trying to become God, but Dr. Steiner and Dr. Pascal had a plan. Dr. Pascal decided to write a virus program in his daughter Lilia's brain, and Steiner went ahead and wrote the activation program to that virus in Rion's brain. Fathers of the Year right here. By the way, this is like 3 games that I've played recently that have had kind of fucked up dad characters. I don't know why this keeps happening, just pointing it out. Anyway, now we know what's going on. Rion and Lilia have been separated, and the other Galerians are trying to hunt them down, and the two need to reunite to bring down Dorothy. Rion heads outside and uses his powers to lift a car out of the pond. I know, seems a bit random, and I don't know why this works now and not earlier, but look, we found Dr. Pascal. That's no place to park your car. And why are you holding that billiard ball? The other billiard ball was on Rion's dad's desk, and in the game room of the house, there's a billiard table with 2 balls missing. Placing them moves the table out of the way and reveals a stairway to the basement. Told you this place was designed like a funhouse. Down here we see where Rion and Lilia had the activation programs written into them, and we also find some notes written by Dr. Pascal, talking about how Lilia told him she developed telepathy after the virus program was written into her head. He also talks about meeting a child near the gates who was accompanied by men in black hats. After that, the kid we saw in the hospital is just there.
I'm tired of waiting.
Who are you?
Me? Why, I'm the Birdman.
Birdman? Your name is Birdman? I'll never understand kids in the 26th century.
Was it you who killed my family?
No, it wasn't me. Nope. It was my little brother. They died while he was rummaging through their minds. It must have hurt. Your head must ache too. You'd better tell me how to contact Lilia, or else.
Ooh, give him a little static shock there, didn't you?
Damn you! You stubborn fool.
Rion picks up the shed key from Dr. Pascal's desk, and Birdman teleports around and appears from time to time as you're running out of the house. In the shed out back, there's a doll that belongs to Lilia, and some other consumable items you might need. Having the doll seems to act as a conduit so Rion can communicate with Lilia. She's holed up at the Babylon Hotel in the city. Birdman appears, wanting to know where Lilia is. Then they have a little slap fight with her psychic powers. Anyway, Birdman can also send out shockwaves, but he teleports and creates copies of himself. It's a cool boss, but as always, the strategy is just run around in circles until you can attack. After Birdman is defeated, he tells Rion to be careful of himself.
Lilia had continually called for me through her ragged old doll that was left in the shed. In her mind was hidden the virus program for destroying the insane computer, and in mine, the system for accessing it. My parents are dead, and today I killed a man I had just met. What a nightmare this day has been.
And it's not even over. I don't know, I feel like you could read a line like that in any teenager's diary. They're probably not writing about communicating with their childhood friend through a
ragged old doll,
or detailing how
today I killed a man I had just met.
But still. Next stop, Babylon Hotel. I've been waiting for this part because this is the best area in the game. The vibes here are just perfect. I love the way the hotel feels, and it's so different from the 2 areas that we've just seen. There are even NPCs here with their own little stories and subquests. Kind of feels like a whole different team designed this section. We get this great opening cutscene where we get to see another little glimpse of Michelangelo's city. The hotel is made up of the lobby area, plus 2 floors of rooms. Rion is given a key to room 302 at the front desk where these 2 guys are just standing there. nothing weird about this. You can go straight to Rion's room to advance the story, but you can also visit each of the rooms and meet all the other freaks who chose to stay at the Babylon Hotel. There's a maintenance guy in room 201.
What do you want?
What are you doing?
Fixing the pipes. The slummy hotel still uses steam heating. The city power is ridiculously expensive. Besides, supply is very limited.
Okay. 203 has a bomb maker, like actual nuclear weapons. A drug dealer is in room 204, and we'll get to him soon. A priest is staying in room 206, and whoa!
Do you keep the money in your pockets? Please, the donation. I need the donation. Where is the money?
There are no words for that one. Room 303 is a gun nut.
Don't mess with me, kid. I can't stand the sight of you. Yeah! Ow!
He like yeets a beer bottle at him. What the fuck? 304 has an actress.
What do you want? It's too late for apologies. I'd rather die, I tell you.
Huh?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was someone else. How did you get in here?
The door was open.
And room 306 is this red-haired man. The other rooms are unoccupied, but we'll visit all of them throughout this section for one reason or another. When Rion enters his own room, he gets a phone call from the front desk. Then Lilia's dolly that he's been carrying around shocks him. In the lobby, the fat kid we saw earlier, whose name is Reinhardt by the way, is clearly up to something, and a Spice Girl appears with a group of bodyguards.
There's no escaping now, is there?
This is Rita. Rita, Reinhardt, and Birdman are three of the Galerians created by Dorothy, and they've been sent to hunt down Lilia. There's a note taped to Rion's bathroom mirror telling him to go to room 306, and the red-haired man there tells Rion to meet him in the lobby. When Rion heads downstairs, he notices the guy working the front desk is missing, and there's a blood trail leading to the back room. They were a little bit late on that horror sting. I thought that was strawberry jam. In the back room, Rion finds the desk clerk's body stuffed in a sink. There's also a circuit breaker for the hotel that we'll need to make use of later. As we go to leave the back room, we get a cutscene of the fat kid just losing it in front of the grandfather clock on the second floor. The red-haired guy now shows up in the lobby and tells Rion to go to room 204, the drug dealer's room. But we need to do a super secret special knock.
Knock like this to get in.
What? Is Rion's chest made of wood or something? Okay, so this is the most bullshit part of the entire game. You have to perform this knock with the exact timing that the guy in the lobby showed you. And if you're off by even a little bit, it doesn't work. It took me like 20 minutes to get this right. I checked the recording, and I had forgotten about this part from when I was playing as a kid, but it sucked back then as well. At first though, I thought it was an emulation issue, because I'm using DuckStation to record this, but I found a GameFAQ post from 2000 with people complaining about this shit too, so it's just how they designed it. I can't even give you any advice here, just keep listening to the guy in the lobby if you have to, and pray. Here's what it sounded like when I finally got it.
Come on in.
Eventually, the door opens and Rion meets the dealer who gives him access to the third and final psychic power, D-Felon. The rest of the hotel is a matter of wandering around and visiting the other guests. They'll tell you to investigate different rooms, and doing so will usually end up with you getting ambushed by enemies. Returning to the guests then has them winding up dead. You can scan their bodies to see how they were killed, and these scan results, man, they end up looking like some kind of family vacation photo album. This one looks like one of the rabbits gave him a swirly and things just got way out of hand. When Rion checks room 301, he finds out that this was the room where Lilia was staying. There's a note addressed to him, informing him that she couldn't wait any longer, but she's still somewhere nearby. Reinhardt is hanging out in front of the grandfather clock, and Rion realizes he was the one who killed his parents.
You killed Birdman, didn't you? I am Reinhardt. Now it's your turn to die!
So it was you who killed everyone.
So what if I killed them? It's my mother who you should be scared of. We must obey. You must obey what she says.
Stop it! It's time for your medicine.
No. I'm sorry. I won't do it again. No, no medicine. It's only $2.50.
Rion heads to room 305 and fights Reinhardt, who goes down so easily, but just make sure you don't hit him with red because he's immune to fire. When Rion returns to the lobby, the maintenance guy has opened up the way to the boiler room, which is connected to an abandoned restaurant next door. You have to cut the power in the hotel for the service elevator to work, but this also brings out some arabesque, those monsters I bolted from in the hospital. Now we get a good look at them. And yeah, these guys are freaky. They do kind of just look like walking versions of lickers from RE2. They spit up acid onto the floor and use their claws to slash at you. The elevator here leads to the restaurant, where Rion finally reunites with Lilia. But Rita also shows up, and she's pissed Rion's killed her brother.
Now I shall avenge my dear brother. See, Reinhardt wasn't too bright, but he was my pride and joy. He was gentle as could be. Don't you see, he was the only brother that I had left. And that is why I'm going to make sure that you die a slow and extremely painful death.
There's that foam furniture.
Lilia!
Don't worry, I know I can disrupt her psychokinesis with my power.
Ugh! You little punk!
Oh, jeez, the table again. So Rion faces off against Rita. She flies around on a table for a lot of the fight, and you can't hit her while she's up there. You'll also need to dodge the furniture she throws at you with her psychokinesis. So it's circle time.
Die!
After Rita realizes she's about to lose, she injects herself with more chemicals to attempt a short. Again, this is not the way this works in-game. Then she has some kind of psychic orgasm that ends up scaring poor Rion. Oh my god. The next bit is this weird Eros Thanatos metaphor with Lilia just having to sit on the sidelines and watch it all. It's super angsty and melodramatic, but it's also kind of amazing.
Are you all right?
Don't worry about me. I don't like myself anyway. Oh, I hate this power that I possess. But this is the moment I've been waiting for. I always wanted the end to come, but I never would die. It's too bad we'll never meet again. Rion, I beg you, please destroy me. My head aches so. Please, it hurts so bad. I just can't stand it anymore. Rion. Oh.
Rion, don't do it!
Lilia, it's the only way. She's decided she wants to die now.
Yeah, but...
Please, just do it.
I can't stand it any longer either. Please forgive me.
No!
Ugh.
Wow. And yeah, Thanatos sounds like Thanos. Ha 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 ha. All the Marvel jokes. Ha 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 ha. Everyone is laughing. Nobody's laughing. That fucker tried to kill half the universe. After Rita's death, Rion explains to Lilia that he was experimented on in the hospital, and that's how he gained his psychic powers. But Lilia hears Rita's voice telling her not to believe it. Now, Rion and Lilia need to head to where Dorothy resides so they can upload the virus. And Dorothy is inside the Mushroom Tower. Again, I wish they could have thought of a cooler name for that.
They all live where the networks converge, in the Mushroom Tower, high above Michelangelo City. I must destroy Dorothy. Nothing can stop me now. Not even the dark city night that fills my heart with fear.
Phew, just throwing out banger emo lyrics left and right throughout this whole section. So Lilia and Rion take public transportation over to the Mushroom Tower, and Rion pulls a sort of weaker version of the Matrix building breach to get in. Well, They tried their best. Lilia and Rion need to split up to ascend the tower. Lilia goes to some weird control room, and Rion needs to fight through floors of enemies. And that's all this area is. Rion scans the elevators for patterns of colored lights, and Lilia just plays Simon Says to unlock the elevators. At this point, I had run out of Delmator to heal my AP, and trying to take out the first set of armored enemies sent me into a short. So I had to hobble through the entire tower, eating all the recovery capsules I had. There are some caps and also chemicals scattered throughout the floors, but there's no Delmator until the final floor. This left me with only 2 recovery capsules and 1 Delmator when it came time to face the last 2 bosses, which need to be fought one after the other, and there's no saving in between. And it's not tough, it's just time consuming, and there wasn't much margin for error. The trip up the tower was pretty easy though, as all of these high-level enemies are susceptible to shorting and all die in one hit, but if I would have had some Delmator left over, this would have been a bit less stressful. Anyway, as Rion ascends the tower, the ghosts of the Galerians that have died, the ghosts of the Galerians that Rion murdered, show up and taunt both he and Lilia. When Rion scans Reinhardt to try to see who's creating these psycho illusions, he catches a glimpse of himself. After ascending just 3 floors, must be really tall ceilings in this tower, Rion is reunited with Lilia.
Rion, now is our only chance to reach the hands of God.
Come again? On the top floor of the tower, there are 5 chambers. Inside the first 3 are each of the Galerians that Rion murdered, remember, and the 5th one he can't get a read on at first. The 4th chamber contains a Galerian named Cain, who looks an awful lot like Rion. After scanning the other 4 chambers, Rion can finally scan the 5th one.
This is the only one without a name. That's you, Rion. Who are you? I'm Cain. Quite a resemblance, don't you think? I mean, we're brothers after all. So it should be no surprise to you that we look exactly like each other. What the hell is going on? Heh, you're not as bright as I thought you were. You're my kid brother. You're not the real Rion. The real Rion died at Michelangelo Hospital a long time ago. How's your memory now? Is it still holding up for you, or are you shorting out?
So Cain here reveals that Rion isn't the real Rion. Supposedly, the real one died years ago in Michelangelo Hospital. This replacement was created by Dorothy and had his appearance altered to look just like Rion. The activation program was written into this imposter Rion's mind and was sent out to find Lilia, all according to Dorothy's plan. But Rion doesn't believe it.
Do you really think you escaped from the hospital's isolation ward all by yourself? No, it can't be. I know without a doubt I am Rion. If so, then why do you have the same powers as us? So you never thought about that, did you? Who are your real mother and father? You'll probably say you have lots of childhood memories, but do you really think they're real? The fact is, you're a Galerian, just like the rest of us.
Lilia doesn't believe Cain's bullshit either, but Cain explains that Rion was programmed to find Lilia while Cain was programmed to kill Rion. Then they fight. One of the weirdest fights, since it actually takes place in fully 3D space, and it takes a little bit to get used to since the camera sort of swings around with Rion's movement. I also like Cain's evil laugh when he teleports. What the hell is that? But again, like every boss fight, just run around in circles and wait for openings. After Cain's death, Rion questions his identity and his own memories, but Lilia still refuses to believe that he's an imposter. The 2 of them then head into the next room to confront the supercomputer Dorothy.
Welcome home, Rion. I see you have found Pascal's daughter. Good work. That virus program hidden in her mind was the only thing that ever threatened me. But now that we have her, nothing can stop me. I command you to kill her now.
Rion, of course, doesn't listen to Dorothy's command, though Dorothy tells him that he shouldn't let the false memories that she's implanted in him deceive him. He's a Galerian, her creation, and he should obey her. Then she, bops him on the head. Ah! Negative reinforcement, Dorothy. That shit don't work anymore. Gotta read up on New Age child psychology. So yeah, this just convinces Rion that he needs to bring Dorothy down. You're not actually attacking Dorothy in this fight, just these giant floating eyeballs that encircle her. Once all the eyeballs are taken care of, that's it. Dorothy tries to beg for mercy, but Lilia uploads the virus and Rion activates it.
Please don't! bad.
Goodbye, Mother.
Boy, that weird psychic orgasm scene, the mushroom tower exploding, Rion's last release of power has pushed him to the brink, and he feels like he's about to die.
Rion, we've got to get out of here or we'll die too.
No, Lilia. You go.
No.
Just let me die here. But I am the real Rion, aren't
Yes, you are the real Rion.
Rion? So he wasn't Rion this whole time.
You are Rion, so you must come with me. Rion? Rion!
I'm so glad we met.
Rion!
And that's the end. All we get here is this slow pullback with an ominous rhythmic chime that just rips us out of this world. It's a pretty depressing ending, and it's not helped by the darkly ambient ending track over stills of some of the game cutscenes during the credits. You really feel like you're just left hanging there. We don't know if Rion was actually a Galerian created by Dorothy, or if it was all a ruse, taking advantage of his amnesia. We also don't know if he's really dead or not. Spoilers, he isn't. And for more info on the other stuff, we'll have to check out the sequel, Galerians Ash. But I'm going to have to hype myself up to play that game, because I've played it before, and it sucks. But that's never stopped me from covering a game before. After clearing the game, you can load your finished save file and play through the game again. There's nothing new. You can try to get any scans or cutscenes that you may have missed the first time through, because the game keeps track of that on the main menu. The real reason to play again is that you could start with a short, and you can run now while shorting. This makes a second playthrough immensely fun, as you can just heal through the HP drain and run around exploding the heads of regular enemies. You'll need some chemicals to fight bosses, but you can go ham on everything else, and Rion's run animation while shorting is just the best. Overall, Galerians is a pretty average survival horror game. Really, your mileage will vary depending on how cool you think using psychic powers are, and how tolerant you are of some of its design choices, like the limited inventory and constantly rising anger points that you need to keep an eye on. But the art direction and the atmosphere are fantastic. It's not great horror, but it's good sci-fi. The high-tech medical center, remote house, dilapidated hotel, these are all great settings. Even though the final area is very straightforward and is just a series of open rooms, the design there is even interesting, with this kind of monster motif on all the elevators. It's a cool quirk. And while Galerian's story has a lot of tropes that you've probably seen before in a lot of other sci-fi stories, I feel like all the beats are pretty well done. Some of the more impactful and interesting story sequences are let down by wooden voice acting, but I can't really tell you if that's a good or a bad thing. I love bad voice acting, and all of this...
Don't worry about me. I don't like myself anyway.
Just heightens the experience for me. Well, I don't think heightens is the right word, but it twists it in an interesting direction. I sometimes also just love the melodramatic writing. It brings a smile to my face. and the glimpses we get at the larger world are intriguing. I wish there were some RE2-like segments where we get to wander the streets of Michelangelo's city, but the few hints we get at the larger city are enough to set my imagination in motion. Character development is also almost non-existent, and I feel like there's a lot there that they just didn't have time to explore. I would have loved to see more of the Galerians and learn more about their pasts and maybe even what they actually do in this world beyond the plot of the game. Unfortunately, even the Galerians Rion OVA doesn't capitalize on this. Its 3 episodes only have a slightly longer runtime than the cutscenes in the actual game, so aside from a couple of extra scenes and longer conversations, it's pretty much just isolating all the cutscenes from the first game in slightly higher quality. But there's still the hint of something greater, and I feel like that counts for something. Wanting more out of a game world isn't necessarily a bad thing. Anyway, that's Galerians, a true black sheep of the PS1's survival horror library. And that's the end of the video. If you liked it, hit the like button, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. Also, what's your survival horror black sheep? Could be a great game that you feel is underappreciated, or a piece of trash that has redeeming qualities beyond its gameplay. Those are the ones that I'm always interested in, so leave a comment. And if you like what I do here and want to give some extra support to the channel, consider donating to my Patreon or joining as a YouTube member. Everyone gets to watch videos early, get exclusive updates, and more. So become a dungeon dweller. Join us. If you donate at the $5 tiers or higher, you get your name read out loud, like these dungeon architects. Benifer 94, Half HP, High Food Court, Izzy Lexus, Kyowa, Mr. Sunshine Jr., Nekot the Brave, and Tony Lee. As well as these dungeon connoisseurs, Anjin01, Churm Slurm, Chiral Spiral, Crippler Jones, Dazed Clockwork, Dika Diko, Goats and Goblins, Irregular Rob, Joshua Weber, Mr. Independent, Noel the Monkey, Old Dead Lemons, Rez, Samuel Pandiangan, True Axiom, Warrior Song, Where Am I? Help, and Zach Diedrich. Thank you all for your support, and thank you for watching. Next time, I'm going to cover the greatest Christmas game ever made. Until then, Galerians, check it out. Dungeon Chill, out.